Hi, everyone. My name is Leo Ringer, and I'm one of the two partners at Form Ventures. We're a seed fund based in London, investing in startups that are taking on complex, regulated markets. We're the only fund in the UK, and in fact, the only fund outside of the US with this particular focus on companies where policy and regulation are really material factors. And we leverage our decades worth of experience and also our network to help founders get over these regulatory issues, over hurdles, but also exploit the big opportunities that regulation and policy can create. And we think with it, being the only fund doing that, we've got a really important gap in certainly at the moment in the UK ecosystem, and hopefully in the future in the European ecosystem for founders who need that skill set at cap table from the very earliest stages. It's not just me. I'm one part of the partnership. My co-founder is Patrick Newton. Patrick has a policy background like me, started life at the CBI, then moved into strat consulting and ended up running Deloitte's venture fund, Deloitte Ventures, investing mainly in fintech and enterprise software at seed and Series A. For my part, I left the CBI to go into the British government and advise a politician called Vince Cable, who was Secretary of State for Business at the time, across the whole range of economic policy in the UK. I then left and have advised companies and investors on regulatory and political risk for the last few years before co-founding Form with Patrick 2 years ago. We were lucky to bring on a really top-notch group of advisors early on, and they've helped us shape Form and leverage a huge amount of value add for our startups. I won't go through them all in detail. You can look them up and link to them if you want. But broadly speaking, they cover off real legal expertise in Ian, obviously a great political network in my former boss, Vince Cable. Louise is very senior at Deloitte in the UK with a focus on financial services and fintech. John is one of the leading global experts on competition policy. And Tim has one of the longest track records in venture management, including outside of London and the northeast of England in particular. So why do we invest in regulated markets and why do we think they're attractive? People sometimes think that's a bit counterintuitive, but we actually broke down the unicorns we produced here in the UK, certainly since sort of 2009, so post-crisis. And what stood out to us was that a huge proportion of them are in markets or have business models where regulation and policy are critical issues, really make or break. And it struck us that actually in the UK and in Europe, the same applies. We're really, really good at producing outlier companies and category-defining companies in these sorts of markets, maybe better so than, in fact, on, say, the West Coast of the US, where perhaps the heritage is a bit more sort of consumer and social media focused. So for us, it was a really, really compelling investment proposition that we could get stuck into with a new seed fund focused exclusively on this opportunity. But we also realized it was an important way of differentiating Form from the other funds that exist in the market. There's a kind of joke that the world doesn't need another seed fund. And we took that to heart because we want to add something to the ecosystem. We want to bring a new skill set, both to the VCs we co-invest alongside and also to the founders that we back and partner with. And we noticed that most of the VCs in the ecosystem are doing a huge amount of things really well. But one of the things they're less interested in and less focused on is its regulation and policy issue. It's partly because they don't have that natural background. Policy and regulation is complex. They haven't built over time the regulatory and political networks that you need to do this well. And we realized that we had, and we could bring that as a slot in, if you like, into the seed funding ecosystem in the UK and really kind of add value in our niche with our focus. Sometimes people ask us, well, what do you mean by regulated markets? And hopefully this gives the founders listening a little bit of guidance as to what interests us and the way we think about the world. But we'd also love to hear your thoughts on this as well. So we talk about hard regulated markets. These are the traditional, more kind of obvious ones you might think about. So financial services, healthcare, energy, where there's usually a sectoral regulator or a whole body of law that says what you can do and what you can't do. And that's kind of the bread and butter for us because we really understand that well and we can bring disruption to those often kind of laggard, slow-moving markets with big kind of incumbents that are being protected by that. We also talk about what we call soft regulated markets. That's a bit more subtle. So maybe the business model is reliant on, I don't know, the gig economy model. Or maybe it's a business model in an area which is sort of shaped by regulation, but not directly regulated itself. So we're invested in a company called Organize. It's a workers' rights platform. It's not doing the work of a trade union, but the way trade unions are regulated is really relevant, and the way the labor market is structured is really relevant. And so we call those soft regulated. And then finally, we talk about the regulatory frontier. And this is where policymakers are kind of either ripping open markets for the first time, so saying to the banks, you've got to share your data with everyone, and that kind of open banking policy lever has created a whole new business model opportunity around third-party payments. Or it might be the opposite, where regulators are taking a look at a market like crypto and saying, hey, we want to control this. We want to we want to constrict it. And actually, we think that might create winners and losers. And we're really interested in where policymakers are acting at that frontier, because we think there's big opportunity and big inflection points get created there that startups can succeed with. So at a more practical level, what's our focus for investments at Form? We're looking for UK-based companies at the moment. That's our focus. Policy and regulation have to be a material role, but it doesn't matter if it's not something you've thought about a lot or something that's top of mind. And we define that quite broadly, so don't let that be a barrier. But something that's purely consumer, purely social, has no kind of policy or regulatory complexity for us probably isn't going to be a good fit. Typically, we back companies that are raising between £500,000 and say £3 million. So that can go down into pre-seed and up to sort of bigger seed rounds. But we can't come in at Series A. It's got to be pre-A. And mostly software. So 6 of the 7 investments we've done over the last year or so have been software, but one hasn't in the cultivated meat sector. So we're not afraid of that when we see it, but there is a kind of preponderance of software there. Here's a kind of illustration of some of the portfolio companies we've backed. These range from Brick Lane doing prop tech, Wallet doing income smoothing for variable hours workers. That's a regulated credit business in fintech. Bubble is childcare, and obviously regulation and policy has a huge role to play there, both on the funding side and on the regulatory side. Peppy is a health tech business. So sometimes it's partnering with government, but it's also providing healthcare, which is regulated to a degree. And Organize, I mentioned, on the workers' rights side. So all very different business models. Regulation and policy matter in very different ways, but it is a material factor for all of them. And we'd like to think that if you phoned up any of the founders on this slide, they say that we're amongst their most helpful investors. I'll leave that hostage to fortune out there. You can try it for yourselves. But we really do take our value add seriously as a fund, and it's a KPI for us to make sure we're delivering on that consistently. And here's how we're going to construct the portfolio for Fund 2, which is coming on stream in Q2 of this year. So we're going to invest in 30 companies. We're going to back them initially at seed stage or pre-seed, and typically with a check of around 400K. So in most instances, we're not leading the round. We're coming in as probably maybe the second fund in a round, along with a lead. And that kind of speaks to our complementary or value add, the value add alongside others rather than doing everything. We keep it relatively focused on the policy side. But then we reserve half the fund, so kind of 1-to-1 ratio to follow on and double down in those companies and back them again when they do their Series A and their Series B rounds, but not beyond that. So that's the portfolio construction, and we will be sticking to that pretty tight. I think the main message is we'd love to hear from you. Part of the reason we're doing this is because we think VCs can be a bit inaccessible and hard to reach. We don't believe in warm intros. We don't believe in networking your way towards this. You've got an email here you can reach us on. There's a button below. If in doubt, we'd love to hear from you. If you're not sure on those sort of criteria I set out earlier, they're not hard and fast. So if in doubt, reach out, send a deck, send a teaser, whatever it may be. Put Notwit's MMVC in the subject line if you want to stand out. And we'll do our best to get back to you quickly. But we really encourage everyone to reach out, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.